something like how to read result sets and all. So we were talking about something like iterate. So we can iterate through result set only in one direction. So it was there in JDBC 1.0 version. So when the first version came up, right? So in that we have JDBC 1.0, right? So this is a version when the result set was if you are using result set, it will be you can pass only towards one direction, right? And you cannot get back and read the data, right? So if you're using JDBC 2.0, right? If it is 2.0, then in result set you can actually traverse in any direction, right? So which is like I can say the next one, and if it is to move to the next rows. If you want to the previous rows, then you have something called dot previous, right? Dot previous is something which will come up to read the previous row. Like if you're not looping up maybe, right? Or if you're looking from the last row, then you can just say rs dot previous. You can see this previous will give you a boolean again, right? And whenever you say previous, it will just give you boolean and it will move to the previous row. Now here even next here, right, will give you boolean value. Yeah, that's why we are checking until the next is true. We are traversing through the rows, and if it is false, then we are coming out of your rows. Right? That's how it works. Fine. That is one thing here. And then in the same way, you have something called in JDBC2 itself. You have last. If you want to check, if you want to move to the last row, you can just say result set dot last. It will take you to the last row, right? And it will say whether there are rows, if there are rows or there not. So if you want to check whether there are rows or not, you can just say last, right? If last is returning something, yes, there are some rows. And if you want to move back to the first row, you can just say first, right? This is first, fine. And then you can also go like if you want to move to before first, you have something called before first, right? Before first is nothing but if you want to move the pointer to the to the first row, that is before first. As I've explained already, right? Whenever there is a data which is retrieved from database, right, the table will be pointed by our result set, right? And the data will be pointing. So let us say this is column, right? Let me maximize this. Let us say this is column. These are the column names, right? Now this is the first row. Now before first is nothing but this. The pointer will be waiting at this place, right? Because when we say next, what does it mean is it move to the second rows before. I mean before second row, which is the starting point of second row, and this row will be written. That is called as a before first, right? Before first. You have something called before first, right? In the same way, you have something called after last, right? After last is nothing but it will take you. I think it is it will take you to the last row, and the result set will be pointing at last, which means your result set traversing is done till last. That is called as a last, which is your after last. So these pointers are given for this result set in order to move from any direction, right? If you want to read afresh, you can just say something like before first. The pointer will move back to the before first, and again you can start from rs dot first. If you want to move from the last, you can just say after last, right? And you can start reading result data using your dot previous, right? You can do it this way, right? But this will be done. This is allowed from JDBC 2.0. Right? That is how it works. And even in JDBC 2.0, right? So using this result set, you can actually update your data, right? So here what we have seen is we have select star from some table, right? So this will get some data, right? This will get some data and will give us in a result set. Using this result set itself, right? It will give you access to some editable mode of your table, right? Now how to edit some data, right? Now, so as we have seen, whenever we do something called rs.next, right, which means, so initially whenever the result set is created, right, the result set will be in before first, right? The pointer will be over here, right? Now whenever you say result set dot next, the pointer will move to the next before, and the current row will be written as a the current row, and all the details will be saved in result set with the name, with the label name called, this will take, the column name will be taken as a key, and the value will be the current row set. That is how the result set is being saved. Now let us say you want to change some cell. Let us say you want to change the name of a first row. You know what we'll do? Obviously, if for the first looping, right, if you say rs.next, which means you are in a first row, right? So if you want to update the row, then you have something called result set dot update some. If you want to update row in the sense whether you want to update which column. Let us say you want to update a name, and this name will be a string column, it is, right? Then we can say update, you have something called string. Anyways, you have everything here. Whatever we have seen, something called get int, get string, right? The same way you have update string, update int, update float, right? Update your double, update date, everything is there, right? So the basic thing is, you can use a update string. Using this, what you can do, you can give the, either you have two different options. First thing, either you can give the column index and change the value. So never go for column index, because this is something which is very dangerous, right? So column index, why it is dangerous? So we'll just see. So I said, let us say in our database, right, we have these columns. Let us say I just want ID, or I just want ID and name from students table. So what we'll do? So what we'll be doing is, we'll be just saying like select ID comma name from a student's table, right? So in this case, right, in this case maybe the column ID of ID is 0 and the name is 1, right? And we have coded something, and what we have done, we just something like, yeah, I want to change 1, or I want to change the ID, it is 0th index maybe, with something called maybe serial number, right? Now if anyone comes and changes this query, let us say if I just said date comma, because I can also get date, right, from this table, because the date is a legal column in this table, right? So in that case, what happens? The complete picture got changed, right? Because all the columns will be moving one step, ahead, and the first column will become date. Then again you have to change the whole code. That's why never go for using a column index. Always prefer using something called column name, right, or label, you say, right? If you want to change ID, just say update string of string label, column label, and the value with which you want to change, right? And the value here, let us say I want to change something 57, right? That is how you can update string, right? Now whenever you just say update string, right, it won't directly update. So you have to do something called so update row is something which is a permanent update. So here what you can say, you can just say update string of ID something if you want to change ID. Let us say if you want to change some name here, right, with something else, right, some X. Hello? Yeah, I'm recording the session. Sure. Right? Thanks, Swami. Yeah. So yeah. So whatever rows, or in a current row, whatever cells you want to update, right, you can just update this in this way. So this update string will not update your row. What it will do is, the current row in a cache, it will update the cells. But when you say something called after updating all the cells, you have to do something called rs.update row. So this is something which is a permanent update. Now again, remember guys, this is something like you are actually committing the data, right? Because in database, right, you have, whenever you update or something, right, you have to do something called commit. Until unless you do commit, it sometimes, right, sometimes some databases like SQL Server, right, it is auto commit. If you update something, it will be auto committed and it will update the entire row. You cannot roll back that one. So what is rollback here is, now let us say you are updating this, right? You have done something called update string and all. Now let us say if you don't want to update these things, right, then immediately what you can say, right, based on some condition, right, you can just say cancel row updates, right? It will roll back everything, right? So that is what it is. Now this is something which is used to update row. Now here let us say if you want to add a new row, what happens then, right? If you want to add a brand new row here, right? So always what happens here is, whenever result set gets the data, right, it will keep one thing ready, which is it will always keep a row like this, which is nothing but your after last, right? So this point is called as the after last point, and this row will be empty row, right? Now how our result set allows to add a new row is, right, you have to go to the after last, right, and just say update this cell, update this cell, and update this cell, right? Which means it feels as if you are actually updating the existing row, but yes, in database table it is not there, but it is something like you are updating a existing cell, right? And then so here what you have to use here is, you are updating something here, and then after that you have to do something called, make, right? Yeah, move to insert row, right? Move to insert row is something which will insert the row at last, right? So this is something to insert a row into your database, right? And this move to insert row is again something which is permanent update. This is again permanent. There is no rollback, right? So you have to do rollback at this place itself. You have to cancel update. Cancel update row will only get back your right? So that's how it comes. Or you also have something called rs dot, you have insert row, right? You can also use this, which is insert row, right? This insert row will also insert the complete thing again. This is something which is the direct commit to the database, right? So this is again a permanent update, insert row, right? So that is how we can actually edit some things. And again, this is allowed only from JDBC. If you are using JDBC version more than or greater than 2.0, right, this is allowed, right? And now let me just show you something. Yeah, here you can see that I'm using, so I'm talking about JDBC version, right? So you can actually download your JDBC version. You can see here I'm using JDBC 6 and subversion 11, right? Now this is my latest jar which I have downloaded and which I am using it now, right? Whenever you add your JDBC jar to your until unless you add your JDBC jar, right, you can't actually start your database programming, because java.sql you'll be getting from your package called JDBC only, right? And the latest version anyways is moving on is 6, which is a standard version, right? Now here that's why I'm able to do everything. But if you are using JDBC 1.0, anyways, even if you find, yes, you may find JDBC 1.0s also, but that is something which have got some limited features, right? Now let's move on to the next. Result set have got some feature. How it works internally is, let us say you have some 1000 rows in a database, right, for some query. if you are saying something called select star from students, right? So let us say for this query you are getting 1000 rows. Now how does it works? So when you run this query, when you say execute query, right, so it will not get all the 1000 rows. Result set will not get all the 1000 rows. What it will do is it will get first 10 rows. How it works is it will get your first 10 rows, and then once you are actually moving on with the result set, right, next, when you are doing next, and when it comes to 10th row, let us say, right, when it comes to 10th row, then after 10th row if you just say next, then what happens, then your result set again search for again search in database to see whether there are more rows, then it will fetch another 10, in the same it will fetch another 10 once these are. So in this way your result set works. So this is a sort of advantage here, where you are not actually getting all the rows whatever you want, right? I mean your program will not wait until the whole rows are loaded into result set, because fetching the rows 1000 rows and loading into result set is a very heavy task, right? Unless your network is so fast, unless you provide a maximum bandwidth for this, right, it will be very slow. But yes, in real time servers, right, obviously you'll be providing a high bandwidth, right, to transfer much bigger data over the networks, right? So in this way it fetch. So you can also change this size of this. So you have something called result set dot set fetch. Here you have set fetch size. This is something where you are actually changing your so how many rows you want to fetch, right, per iteration. Let us say if I'm giving 100, right, which means it will fetch 100 rows at a time. But anyways, if there are only 70 rows, right, and if you set fetch as 100, obviously it will get your 70 rows, right, and then it will stop at there. But it is recommended that it is always recommended not to give the bigger sizes, because sometimes your result set will take more time to read out, right? Let us say if you are actually programming, if you are using a web application to to get some data, right, then in that case, if you are using fetch as bigger count, then what happens if there are 100 requests, right, different requests, you have to, your server have to update, your web service or your servlet have to update each and every client with some data, right? So at that time it will become so slow, because you have to fetch results for 100 different clients. Each and every client's request may not be same. Some guy will be requesting for something and some guy will be requesting for something else. But yes, database things should be done across, right? So that's why it is always recommended to give the fetch size low, or just leave it out, right? So if you just leave, it will take care of getting the rows as something, right? So if you want to set the, if you just want to set the complete result set to some max row set, right, you have something called set. You can actually do that, which is fetch, or you have something called, I think, yes, this is the one, set fetch. Set fetch, if you say 100, right, it will fix up the boundary, right, which is it may get from first row to the 100th row, right? That is how it fetch. Right. So that is that is what we have from till JDBC 2.0, yes, and even in JDBC till 6, right, these are the features of result set which are continuing to work, right? And then in JDBC, so this you can see here, there is one issue here. So unless it fetches all the 1000 rows, if anything happens to connection, right, what happens then? Now let us say there are 1000 rows and this is running in 5th iteration, which means only 50 rows have been retrieved, right? Then what happens if my connection breaks, right? If connection breaks, the whole result set will be collapsed. right? Why? Because unless you read all the rows, right, the connection should be active. If your result set or connection breaks, the complete result set will be collapsed. Not only result set, your statement will be collapsed, right? Your result set will be collapsed. That is how it happens. That's why for result set there is one disadvantage, that whatever you have to do keeping your connection active. You can't say just close this and move on with your things. No, it cannot happen, right? So that is what is something which is you have to keep open, which is connection. This was the main disadvantage. And yes, if it is taking time to complete reading of data, you have to wait till it completes the reading of data, and then you have to clear. We'll come to the clearing part once we are done with this result. Okay, so for this we have one more class, I would say, called row set. So this row set is under your javax.sql. You can see it is under your javax, right? We have already seen this javax. So this javax is something if you guys can remember, right? So this is an extended package of Java. So this extended packages they have created, right? Keeping a rule that, right, each and every package, whatever you're writing inside this, should be in Java. You cannot write a class or some interface, right, which is out of Java. That's the only package. And this row set is mainly introduced from JDBC 3.0, right? If you're using a second version of JDBC jar, you won't find this row set, right? So this row set you can use in the same way, right? So you can use this row set in the same way. Let us say I'm taking it rs1 is equal to statement dot execute row, right? So this result set, as I'm using the old one, I don't know whether I can connect this or not, because I'm trying to get it SQL, right? If you may cast it to row set and rs1 dot, let us see, yeah, you can see here whatever you can do in result set can be done with a row set. You have something called previous, you have something called after last, you have before first, right? You have something called update string, right? You have everything. Now what is the difference between result set and row set? The main difference between result set and row set is result set will fetch all the rows at a time, right? It won't, you don't need once you execute query, right, once it moves to the next step, you don't need connection to be you don't have to persist your connection. Why? That result set is something which will get all the rows and keep it in this tabular form. Again, this keeps in the same form of result set, and whatever you can do in result set, you can do it in a row set, right? So that's the main difference. If you're using result set, you have to maintain the connection until your records are processed. But if you're using row set, or you have some more thing called, one more thing, if I don't know, yes, I have something called cached row set, right? This is mainly introduced from 4.0 anyways, right? Your row set is there from 3.0, but cached row set is there in 4.0 JDBC, right? So if you have cached row set, all the records will be fetched at a time to the client side, and you can actually close your connection after getting this row set. You don't have to read, you don't have to complete the reading. That is something where you are getting the raw data, right, and it will get it into your set. But yes, your network will become slow, or if your network is slow, it will stay here. If there is any situation where you have to get all the rows, you can go for row set, that, but you have to be sure that whether you want to go for row set or not, because row set will actually take the highest band if you are actually fetching some bigger data, right? The data fetch will not be small. So as we are checking out here result student table, right, where we have only 3 students, it will not be the real-time situation, right? There can be hundreds or thousands of students in a college, and what you're doing, you're actually fetching the whole data and you're actually taking out in a result set, which is client side. And client side, even if you get the data and keep it in your client side, right? Client side is nothing but your Java application. It can be your standalone application, or it can be your web application. It doesn't matter. If you are getting something into your local, which means your processing also will become slow, right? Because the cache, you are saving some 1000 rows, which means if there are some 10 columns in that table, let us say, if it is integer, of type integer, let's take a basic example, integer. So for one row, how many bytes we are getting? We are getting some 40 bytes, right? Because each and every int will take 4 bytes. We have 40 bytes, and you can imagine if we have some 1000 rows, so it's around 40,000 bytes you are actually keeping it in a cache, which means 40 KB of data you are keeping in a cache. Now you can imagine how your application will run, right? So for running our application, right, your processing speed will not be of 40K, right? Even if I open my process, right, if I open my task manager, I can show you the highest thing running here. You can see some 30 MB of thing, right? The basic things will not be running on MBs. Like if you are actually designing anything which is taking some thing in KBs, right, and obviously it is taking some considerable amount of processing speed, which will make your application slow, right? At that point, you have to make sure to use what thing you have, right? Also, here there is one problem with result set, that you can't pass this as a return type or argument. Why? If you pass this as an argument or return type, right, which means you are not closing your connection. That is the first problem. If you don't close your connection, that's a problem again. I'll tell you what is the problem, right? But if you are returning this, which means, let us say you have returned it to some method and you are closing your connection, right? In a same method, wherever you are opening connection, you have to close. And after closing, if you return your result set, what happens? Your result set is also collapsed. So that's why you can't return or send the argument. In the same method, you have to read the data. Either you have to store this data in some other array list or something, or you have to process data here itself. That's one disadvantage here, but yes, you have to do that. There is no other way go. If you want, if there is no other way and you want to return the data after reading, you can go for row set or cache set, right? That's the only thing, right? So by default, whatever you do in JDBC, right, it's a dynamic commit, right? As soon as you update statement, right, it will automatically commit, right? Till now we have seen something called theft, right? Let us say I'm talking about update, let us say that update, right? So update from table, this may not be the same, update some table, right? Update so and so, where, right, we can just give the query of update, let us say, right? So here by default, if you don't give anything in Java, right, your JDBC, if you say execute something, so for update we'll just say statement, let us say dot, maybe we'll just say execute, right, some execute query or direct execute. So this will execute this update and will give you the return type. You just have to see here, this returns a boolean, right? Now this will update and will give you boolean, let us say, right, SQL. Now what happens here, whenever you execute this, right, this one line will actually commit the whole thing. But yes, it is always better to just say you should not commit this directly, right? So for that you have something called rs dot you have something called set statement rs dot set this yes. So it will be in your connection maybe dot set connection is yet in your statement dot okay set Max rows portable. Okay, I'm not getting that option. Okay, it seems I don't I'm not getting that option, but you have something called, if you want to actually restrict that, you have something called set commit. Set commit is the option where you can give something called some boolean value, which is, if you set true, what it does is it will actually make your auto commit as true, and if you set it fast, right, what you can do is you can actually make that auto commit will be fast, and whenever you update or delete some row, you have to make use of something called dot commit, right? And this dot commit is automatically being given here. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, so here we have just seen that, right? You have something called rs dot, we used to do something called update row, right? Update string, let us say, right? So this is something which will not automatically update. So in order to update this, you have to use something called rs dot, maybe insert row, or you have to use again update row maybe. So this is something which is a permanent update, right? So that is what happens in here. So this applies or this holds good for all the databases. It is not like it works only for your Oracle database, but yes, this also holds good for any database. It can be DB2 or SQL Server. It holds good for that, right? And here you have something called data types, which is glob, and so till now whatever you have seen is a finite data types, like something like string, id, date, or something. Now you also have something called lob data. What is lob? Lob is nothing but large object, right? We call something called maybe huge glob or huge blob, right? So you have something called LOB. LOB is nothing but large object. This is a data type in database. I hope if you have knowledge of database, right, maybe you may know this much better, right? So these lob data are used mainly if you are actually uploading your resume in a site, let us say, right? Or if you are uploading any, let us take an example of YouTube itself. YouTube. If you are uploading a video, right? So what happens? So obviously your video have to be saved in some database, right? You can't save that as a file in a server. You have to convert or decode or convert it into some binaries or hexa binaries, right? And you have to save it in a database. Now if you want to save that, right, you can't go for string data type, because again, if you use string data type, obviously you cannot hold everything in string data type of a database. So for that we have something called lob data type for a column. In that you have two different things, which is blob and you have glob. You have blob data, which is called as a binary large object. Binary large object is something which allows you to save data in a binary form, right? And glob is nothing but your character, right? Character large object, right? Which will give you to save a complete bigger set of characters into your glob data. Yes, and there is no limit for these column types, and yes, these are designed for heavier data storage. Lob data, which is large order data types, are actually used for saving a large object. Now yes, here in Java you have an option for that, which is rs dot. If your data type is glob or blob, you have something called get blob. You can see here, right? So this will get you the blob data, right? And if you have something called glob, you have your glob data. This also supports the blob and glob data, right? That is what is here. Now I hope this whatever you are talking about, blob and glob, are called as a type of columns. Types of columns, data types. What type of what data type can be saved in a column? You have so many types. You have like character, you have varchar, you have wide varchar, you have long varchar, you have string, right? You have int, you have date, you have right, you have binary. You can directly give some binary error type, right? So there are so many, right? And in Java result set you have all the ways to get all the type of data, right? So that's how you get something called your data types, right? So that is what we have here. If you remember, we were in something called result set, right? So that is what is a result set handling, right? That's how the result set works in different versions and all. But yes, if you are using, obviously if you are actually designing your database things, right, you will be using some latest, at least you will be using JDBC 5jar, I'm sure. Till JDBC 5jar, whatever we have learned, everything is there. There is nothing that which is not there. Everything is there. That is how we process some data. So it all depends on the requirements how we do. But yes, in real time, sometimes you won't be using result set to update some data, because data update is very sensitive thing, and whenever you are updating something, you have to log it up, right? And using result set is something you are getting something in your hand and you are doing. It won't have it is not that simple, right? You have to write a query or store procedures to update a data or delete a data or insert a data, right? So but yes, you have given a feature here. If you are going for some small data, small transaction tables, maybe yes, you can update directly using result set, but in real time you won't be using that result set to update your tables, right? Result set is only to get the data and process your details. But yes, it gives provision to also touch upon accessing your database. Now here, who is giving access to result set is the main thing, right? Now it all depends in one more thing. Let us say the username. I was talking about username and password. If you remember, I said whenever you create a connection, right? What is that? Yeah, whenever you create a connection, you will give your username and password, right? Let us say if your username and password is admin type, then you can update. But if your username and password is read only, it can be read only, right? Most of the time, if your let us say if your application is actually intended to read the data, right, then obviously you won't be actually using your admin user ID password. So DB guys will give you a read-only type, where the read-only type will not be used for updating something. It will not allow, database will not allow a read-only accessed guy to update something. So even that applies here, right? If you are using some update thing, which means obviously result set is internally going through statement and getting into connection and updating, right? Which means this should be this should actually give access to us, right? So that is how it is, right? So yeah, and basically when we were talking about something called blob and clop, right? So there is one basic limitation here. All your character and binary types, right? So your character, if you are using char or binary types, right, this can save data up to 2 GB. 2 GB data of data can be saved in database. Now here, when even this succeeds, right, that is a time where we'll be going for blob and clop, right? I'm talking about 2 GB. You can just imagine 2 GB is a heavier data. It's a very heavy data, right? Right. So if it is exceeding that, yes, then you can go for your blob and clops, right? That is the time where you will be using this. So this is something which is your processing your results. Now after processing your results, right, yes, the 7th step what you have to do is not exception handling. This is something which you have to do it later. You have to do something called clear. Whatever you have created, you have to clear everything, because unless you clear, right, clearing is something where you are actually doing something called closing your connection, disposing your result set, disposing your statement and all. Now why do we need to do this? See, database, every database will have certain set of connections allowed, right? It is not like any number of guys can connect. No, that will never be the case. Obviously you will provide some level where there will be some permissible level of connections. let us say if your database accepts only 30,000 connections and your web application is so so traffic based, right, that maybe per minute you are actually getting something like 50,000 connections, right, 50,000 requests. Then what happens then? Right? That is the time where your load balancing comes. Now I'll explain you what is load balancing, but before that, if you keep your connections open and if you're not closing that, what happens? Let us say 20,000, if you're creating an application where it is not closing the connection, then what happens then? Let us say you have only one database and which holds a traffic of 30,000 connections. Then what happens? As connection grows, your traffic will be blocked, because the guy whoever wants the data, he'll fetch it and he'll go out, he'll close the application. But what happens? The connection is not closed, which means that one connection will be so costly that you are not allowing, after 30,000 you are not allowing any other client to access your database. Because of this, it can be so costly. That's why it's very important to clear. Even if you are getting any error or something, it doesn't matter at all. If your connection is successful and if anything fails in statement or execution or processing, right, you have to make sure to clear it out, right? Then here the question comes, what to clear, right? So here there are three different things, which is connection, you have to clear connection, you have to clear your statement, and then you have to clear your result set. Now when I'm saying clearing, right, which means you have to close this. In Java we do something called closing, and everything should be done in your finally statement. I've written my try here, I've closed my catch here, and if I'm written something called finally. You have to close everything in your finally itself, right? Now how to close this? So yes, it is true that if you close your connection, everything will be disposed. If you close your connection, which means your statement will be closed automatically, right? So if you are actually closing your statement, which means your result set is disposed, right? In that way it happens. But no, don't rely on that. Never rely on just closing connection. So before closing connection, you have to close first your result set. rs dot, okay, so your rs should be your global one, right? So let me just copy this to the global is equal to null, because we have to provide the scope of all the tokens, right? Scope where I can access from try and I can also access from catch, right? Let me take this statement also and make it null here, and the statement. Now you have a scope of this 3. Now first what you have to do here is you have to close your result set, which is rs dot, you have direct method called close. So this will release all the resources from result set. In the same way, you have something called statement dot close, right? This will clear the whole statement line, and then you have to close it. Now why I have given this space is, now here let us say if you are in your try catch, right, let us say database didn't accept your connection, which means the connection object will fail here, right? Your driver will be loading, yes, that it is true that your driver had loaded, let us say, right, and your connection hasn't happened. Now even before that, let us say there was a problem in loading the driver. Then what happens? Here itself an exception will be thrown, right? When exception throws at this place, which means we haven't made a connection yet, right? So at that time what you have to do, you have to check whether your connection object is not equal to null, right? Because it may be null at this case. If it doesn't load, you have to check null, because this will be null. That's the first case. Now let us say your connection has been made, right, and there was some problem in creating statement. Then what happens? Your statement will be null. So at that time you have to check whether your statement is null or not. If your statement is null, then there is no meaning in closing it out, right? That is why we check your null of your statement. In the same way, let us say your statement is done and there is some problem in fetching or executing your query, which means your result set will be null, which means you have to check whether your result set is null or not. So these 3 checks you have to check continuously, right? So again you have to give that in finally, because anything happens here, one thing should be done, which is clearing part, right? That should be done. So that is why we do clearing part. That's why if you remember, when we were learning finally in our exception handling, we said finally is mainly intended to clearing something. So in files we have seen something called closing our buffer, which is buffer.dispose. We have done it in finally. In the same way, in terms of SQL, you will be actually doing that in here, which is in finally you have to dispose all the connections, all the results at all. This is how we actually should do the exception handling, right? Write everything inside your try catch. If anything happens, yes, you have to do this, right? And again, there is one more thing of the exception handling which you have to do inside your, when you are reading your data, right? When actually you are reading your data, so if anything happens in between, right, then what you have to do, you have to resume. See, if there is some data corrupted, some row, it doesn't mean that your execution of reading data should stop. So always try to do this. Always try to do one more try catch in and keep all the reading in your try catch, right? And what you should do in this try catch, if anything happens, always try to continue your loop, right? So if it is if you are getting any exception in one row, it doesn't mean that you have to stop processing for the whole rows. It may not happen, right? So that's why you have to do this, right? So these are the two, different ways where you can actually do your exception handling things in your reading of it, fine. So that is your clearing and exception handling. So this is how you can actually work on complete JDBC, fine. So that will be all for JDBC. So I'll share you this program, okay, and if possible, I'll try to run my my local SQL server is not running. There was so when I was doing something on my Android, right, so it got corrupted. But yes, I'll clear it out, right,